Hi all, this is Scott. We're going to talk a little bit about your final. Now I've decided to do your final different from your midterm. Your midterm was timed, you had 3 hours. For this one, I'm going to send you the questions in a Word doc, and so you'll have plenty of time. You'll have until from Wednesday noon till Friday noon to get it turned in. I'm also going to post some additional questions in lieu of that fourth essay. So those will be in there as well. I'm going to draw heavily from the student questions, but there will be some that I'll ask all on my own. Those are usually the 10-point questions. It's going to be very similar in format to the midterm. The only difference is it's untimed, so you got a lot of time to capture your ideas and your thoughts. So we'll just go through this fairly quickly, and then if you have questions, feel free to ask before tomorrow at noon. Okay, Adrian Rich, Aunt Jennifer's Tigers. Let's see. Mackenzie asks, how do you interpret the line, the massive weight of Uncle's wedding band? And Ryland kind of echoes this question, but in a different way when he says, what's the relationship between the tiger and the wedding band? So think about this whole idea of the wedding band. We're told Aunt Jennifer's fingers fluttering through her wool find even the ivory needle hard to pull. The massive weight of Uncle's wedding band sits heavily upon Aunt Jennifer's hand. And there are a lot of thoughts about the weight of the wedding band and what that might symbolize in the discussion boards, but you can do additional thinking about that. What do you think the tiger symbolized in the poem? Mackenzie, April, Ryland, all similar questions about that. So, pay attention to the tigers. The tigers are prancing. They do not fear men beneath the tree. They pace in sleek, chivalric certainty. What do you think the tigers represent? And in what ways are the tigers, do we look at the tigers and contrast those with Aunt Jennifer? In what way is she not like the tigers, or in what way is she like the tigers? So Hannah and Janet say, compare and contrast Aunt Jennifer to her tigers. Janet asks, do you agree or disagree that the poem has a strong feminist theme? So, consider that. There's certainly something there that might suggest that. Actually, it's kind of woven throughout the poem. So look at that carefully. And then April asks, what is the meaning of chivalric certainty? So, you guys should know the definition of chivalry. And once you know what chivalry means, you'll be able to know the adjective of chivalric. So if you've read this poem and you've not looked at what chivalry means, look at it, okay? And then think about that word within the context of this poem. Mackenzie, there was only one diving into the wreck question. She says, how do you interpret the line, I am she, I am he, whose drowned face sleeps with open eyes? So you might think about this kind of gender blurring that takes place in the poem Diving into the Wreck. We get it when she talks about Adrian Rich talks about the mermaid and the merman. So we get a lot of blurring, especially near the end of the poem. And so what's the significance of that? How do you read the lines, I am she, I am he, whose drowned face sleeps with open eyes? That drowned face sleeping with open eyes, what's that referring to? You should be able to figure that out through the context of the poem. So those were some of the Adrian Rich questions that were posed. Elizabeth Bishop, there were a number of questions around one art, and I feel like we've talked about that in discussion boards. Let's see. Hannah and Janet say, what if the person had a different rhyme scheme? What if the poem, sorry, not person, what if the poem had a different rhyme scheme? Would that change the message Bishop is trying to portray? So we have a lot of ABA rhyme scheme in that poem. You have the rhymes of master, disaster, you have some off rhymes, but there is a pattern in the poem. And what do you think that pattern's representing in that poem? How would it read differently, let's say, if it were free verse? So the pattern could symbolize a kind of control, which, there could be a tension between the control of the rhyme pattern or the rhyme scheme and the feelings of maybe being out of control within the poem or trying to hold on to, maintain control. So there's a lot to think about there. April says, in what way does the speaker show the loss of control? You can consider that. Tyler says, what does it mean the art of losing isn't hard to master? And again, that's something that's repeated, so you should think about that. Selena echoes that same question. Why is it repeated? The art of losing isn't hard to master. So you should have some thoughts about that. Selena says, defend whether or not you believe the speaker in one art is in denial over the losses she has faced in her life. She says it isn't hard to master. She says it's no disaster. Is that the reality? Is she in denial? What's happening? So you might think about Selena's question. The fish, there was only one question posed. That was by Mackenzie. She asks, what do you think is the meaning of the line until everything was rainbow, 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 which comes at the very end of the poem. So give that some thought. Also, there is a video post that I made of the fish. And I would love to hear from you guys to see, are these posts helpful or not helpful, or what can I do to make these posts better? So please just drop me a line about that. That would be super helpful. And I could also share some of that with our the gang here at the Distance Ed department here at GAV. I think we would all benefit from hearing your feedback. Oh, I wrote Lawrence Hughes. How in the world did I do that? I meant Langston Hughes, of course. Sorry about that. Langston Hughes. Mother to son, we have 4 questions. Why does the mother use the comparison of a staircase to life? Jason and Haley asked that. Emily, Veronica both asked us to analyze the metaphor of the crystal stair. So we can think about the use of stairs, crystal stairs, as metaphors and what they might signify or represent in this poem. What does she mean by her staircase reaching landings and turning corners? Well, Jason says explain it in more than 2 sentences. Yeah, I would hope so. I would hope for a well-developed paragraph, especially if you get, you're not limited to 3 hours. So what does it mean that you're climbing the stair and then you've reached a landing? Is that a momentary time to rest, to reflect? Is it a place where you temporarily feel some safety? What does it mean to turn a corner? And what's around that corner? And is that turning a corner something where you've got a moment of success, or are you turning the corner and you're taking risks because you don't know what's around that corner? What do those phrases mean to you? So you might think about that. Veronica asks, what does the mother mean by and reaching landings? Okay, so similar to what Jason was asking. Okay, the Negro speaks of rivers. Let's see. Why is the use of the word I've significant in the line? This is from Tyler. I've known ancient rivers as the world and older than the flow of human veins. So if you've got the poem in front of you, it's I've known rivers, and then that phrase I've known rivers is repeated, I think, 3 times, and then later we have I've seen its muddy bosom. So that contraction, that I've, what do you make of it? Now there's a big difference. You could say I know rivers, and that's present tense. You could say I knew rivers, that would be past tense. But when you say I have known rivers, that's present perfect tense. It means I knew rivers and I still know rivers. I have known them over time, way back in the days and still to this day. So think about that present perfect tense. I have known them, and why is that significant? Think about the whole issue of time. You have a speaker who says, I've known rivers ancient as the world, older than the flow of human blood in human veins. I've known rivers that are older than people, that existed before people existed. Well, is that possible? In what way have you known them? So what does it mean to know a river? What does that concept of knowing? Defend Hugh's use of my soul to speak of the history of the entire race. So again, the pronouns come up again and again in these questions. So you think, so at the very end, my soul has grown deep like the rivers. How might you read that? So it's real interesting because the title is The Negro Speaks of Rivers. It's not I speak of rivers. It's something more general, the Negro. So is this a person who's speaking for all African Americans or all Africans, or is this singular I, my, representing the more general? What do you make of that? What does the speaker's mention of rivers represent? So do you see rivers, you can see them literally, but is there something symbolic about rivers? And so give that some thought before you start this exam. How do you read that idea of knowing a river? Do you think rivers got any special significance? Okay. Harlem. This is on your site. You'll find the poem Harlem. How does Hugh's use of similes help the reader understand what he's trying to express? So think about all the ways that he describes the dream deferred, like a raisin, he's got all these different ways of describing that dream deferred. And so the simile is the use of like or as. So look at the comparisons. And what do you think Hughes is trying to express through the use of comparisons? What does the mention of Harlem imply about the subject of this poem? That's from Mateo. So you might think about, in what way is this about Harlem? And you might go back and look a little at what I posted about the Harlem Renaissance. If I asked that one, that might help. Or you can do some of your own thinking about that. Selena asks, in what ways did the description of the possibilities of what happens to a dream deferred dreams appeal to the senses? Okay, so the sense of feel, sound, at the end we have, or does it explode? So think about, we have that syrupy sweet mentioned. Think about the use of sensory detail in Hughes's poem. Selena asks, what do you think about the speaker's tactic of pondering what happens to dreams when they don't go as planned? Okay, so give that some consideration. We had a couple questions about theme for English B, also by Langston Hughes. Anne Marie asks, who do you believe is being taught the lesson in the poem? Is it the student? Is it the teacher? Is it both? What do you think? How does the poem relate to society today? In what ways is it or isn't it still relevant today? I kind of tweaked that. Anne Marie and Kavya asked very similar questions. So how does it relate to society? And do you think it resonates in the same way? Is it still as relevant today as when this was written? A lot of good questions about A Raisin in the Sun by Lorraine Hansberry. And I haven't read your discussion boards yet about A Raisin in the Sun, but I am excited to do so. So we're asked a number of questions. Jason says, with the actions of firebombing being mentioned, what do you think the outcome will be for the Youngers moving into the neighborhood that is completely white-owned and not even after being warned? Do you believe their pride is their downfall? I see that as two slightly different questions. So I could see asking a question about pride and how that, and the role of pride in Lorraine Hansberry's play. Veronica asks you to look at the female characters and maybe compare them and think about their roles. And I could see maybe even asking you to focus on two female characters in particular and contrast them. Do you believe Benny's character to be a feminist? Veronica asks. Good question. Compare and contrast Walter and Benny. And Emily Ann Ryland asked that. Since two people asked that, I will give that some consideration. So I don't need to go through every single question here because you'll have it in front of you and you can look, but give these some consideration. Anne Marie asks, this is all the way in number 10, is money the real main issue in the story? Certainly money is an issue, but is that central to the entire story? And if so, what do you make of that? I really asking about the issues of inequality. So you can think about issues of inequality and privilege and how that is highlighted in this play. Kavya also asks, look at Walter at the beginning of the play and then look at him at the end of the play. Do you see any changes that he's gone through? Do you consider him a dynamic character or a static character? And we talked about character types earlier in the semester. How do you see the character of Walter? In what way has he changed, or in what way has he stayed the same? I'm really interested in your thoughts about that one. So I'll give that some consideration. Anyway, I didn't cover every single question there, but look those over. And then in terms of The Great Gatsby, we have Veronica asking, why did he call him The Great Gatsby? So you might think about, do you see him as great? Do you think F. Scott Fitzgerald is being sarcastic or ironic in calling him great? Why that phrase, The Great Gatsby? Jason asks about the line where Jay interrupts Nick explaining that Daisy's voice is full of money. And so what does that mean, that someone's voice is full of money? Let's see. A couple of people asking about how this novel addresses the American dream or what it conveys about the American dream. Kavya says, do you agree or disagree that the characters get what they deserve? Well, what do you think about Gatsby? So think about what happens to him at the end of the play. I mean, not the play, the novel. Do you think he got what he deserved? Did you think that was inevitable and based on his actions, or do you think that, there was some, injustice in what happened to him at the end, or he did not get what he deserved? What do you think about that? Haley asks about the significance of parties in the novel, so I can think about that. E. Cummings, there were a lot of questions about Unjust. There were no questions about Buffalo Bills. So Buffalo Bills could be one of those 10-point questions. You might look that over again. Here we have who or what does the Balloon Man represent? A number of questions about the Balloon Man. Kevin says the Balloon Man is described as lame, queer, goat-footed. What do you think the author is trying to say about the Balloon Man? A lot of questions about spacing. Kevin asks, why does Cummings combine the names Eddie and Bill so that it almost like you read it like in one breath? Betty and Isabel, you read it as one word. I mean, what is he trying to show? Leah asks more generally, talk about a theme that you see in the poem. So I could see asking you something like that, and it might be interesting to see what you all come up with. Elvis also asks about spacing in the poem. So you might also then apply some of that to Buffalo Bills, where there's a lot of word play and line play in that poem as well. Okay, those are all the questions. And so, like I said, I will borrow heavily from your questions. So anticipate the same thing. We'll have 10 questions that'll come from you guys, 5 questions that I'll ask, maybe about things like Buffalo Bills, or if there's some text that's not being mentioned, I could bring that up. And then a few extra credit questions, and then there will be some additional questions which will take the place of Essay 4. The answers should be about paragraph in length for your answers. Again, it's not timed, so you've got some time to play with it. Just think about, did I fully answer the question? Did I directly respond to the question being asked? Okay, that's about it. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. I am around, and you can also post your questions in the Question Cafe. All right, you guys, take care. I know this is the last week. Hang on, and I'm really excited to read your thoughts about these pieces in the final, and feel free to contact me if you need to. Okay, take care, everybody. See you soon.